Hey guys, what's up? Today I'll be doing a video ranking the discography of the band Gorgasm. Now I know I just about say this with every band I talk about, but Gorgasm is one of my favorite bands and probably my favorite, if not tied for my favorite, brutal death metal band along with a couple other groups. And to describe Gorgasm's sound, it would be a mix of straightforward blast beat brutal death metal, but they also put in a couple really unique flares that make them stand out. The first would be their vocal delivery. They always got a couple different vocalists just going for this absolute crazy Spitfire blitzkrieg approach, which is super unique. And the next thing is my favorite part about this band, and that would be the sense of classical melodies they bring in brutal death metal. I think that's super unique, and I love how this band does that in their music. So without further ado, I will be ranking their whole discography. They have 4 full lengths, 1 EP, and 1 demo. The demo will not be included in this list, but the full length, but the EP will. So starting this off at number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we have 2011's Orgy of Murder. This was kind of a comeback album for them after they had disbanded for a bit in the mid and late 2000s. And I also want to mention this band by no means has a bad or even mediocre album. While this is coming in at number 5, this is by no means a bad album. In fact, it's actually really good. But at the end of the day, one of them has to be at the end of the list, and there's a couple reasons why this is coming in at the bottom. And really it comes down to this sounds a little bit different than the rest of their discography. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but to me, I feel like some of the melodies are a little bit lacking as opposed to other releases. Although, like I said, this does showcase some style of riffing that Gorgasm never has in their other albums. There's a little bit more of like a beat down, dying fetus style of groove on this record. And they do it super well. It's just not really something I would necessarily associate this band with. But there's some really good tracks on here. The opener, Bloodlust. My 2 favorites on here would be track 4, Infection Induced Erection, and also track 6, Exhibit of Repugnance. Those 2 songs, they have really good melodies. So there are melodies on this album. It's just not quite as present as on some of their other releases. But if you are looking for just some really, really aggressive, uncompromising, brutal death metal, this is definitely one you should check out, because there are just a lot of like punch the wall, like beat down riffs that remind me a lot of Dying Fetus at times. Super fast, as most Gorgasm records are, just super ferocious. And a very, very solid album, although this does find itself coming in last at number 5. So that would be Orgy of Murder from 2011. And coming in at number 4, this is their second full-length from 2003, Masticate to Dominate. This might be a big surprise. I know most people would probably call this the best Gorgasm album, and I have no problem with people saying that. Personally, for me, it's going to find itself a little lower on the list for a couple reasons, but I will say, objectively speaking, this is probably Gorgasm's best and most mature material. It is just so insanely ferocious. Terrence Manaus is on drums, and he just does an incredible job on the drum performance. From the first track you hear, Anal Skewer, the blast beats are just pummeling away nonstop the whole record. This definitely touches like the 290, 300 BPM blast beat mark, which is very, very impressive. And to go on more about the drum performance, the way Terrence uses the bell in his blast beats is super influential. And obviously he wasn't the first person to do that, but the way he just abuses that bell on the downbeat of every blast beat is super, super awesome. Another thing I love about this album is both Damien and Tom's guitar work. they have some really, really epic like guitar dual solos in some of these songs, which is just really cool. And it's another thing that's kind of unique in the genre. There's a lot of dive bombs. Once again, something you don't see a lot in brutal death metal. But this definitely has probably the most classic Gorgasm material. Stitched oral asphyxia, corpse fiend, charred vaginal effluence, dead fuck, the closer. Super, super insane song. So fast. Yeah, this album is just insane, and I love it. Although it comes in at number 5, just more of personal preference. I prefer the songs on some of their other releases, but this is definitely one I listen to a ton, and I highly, highly recommend. Probably the best album to first check out if you're getting into Gorgasm. So yeah, coming in at number 4, this is 2003's Masticate to Dominate. And coming up at number 3, we have Stab Wound Intercourse. This was their EP from 1998, and this was the first record, or the first release, excuse me, that really put Gorgasm's name out there. Yeah, this is just a super strong and pummeling EP. I love the production on here. The way the drums and the bass come out is really, really sharp. The kick drum sound on here is just, I could listen to that for hours and hours. Probably their most straightforward and simplistic material, although keep in mind, this is simplistic by brutal death metal and Gorgasm standards, so it's really not all that simple, but in comparison to some other stuff they would go on to do, it's definitely maybe a little bit more accessible. It also has a little bit of an old school death metal feel. The opening track on here, Necrosodomy, that first riff, I'm pretty sure they got it from the song Dehydrated off Pestilence album, Consuming Impulse. So there's definitely a big OSDM vibe on this record. But yeah, there's just some really killer tracks on here. And the early Gorgasm days feature Damian Lesky, Tom Tangelos, and Russ Powell on vocals. Russ Powell also being on bass, but I really liked him on vocals with the 3 vocal approach as opposed to the dual vocal approach, which were on some of the other albums, because with that third vocal style Russ brought, it just makes Gorgasm have a little bit of like a grindy sound, and I really love when Russ's vocals just are the super snarl and nasty style. And it comes through really, really well on this record. Stab Wound Intercourse, the title track, is amazing. And also, maybe my favorite Gorgasm song, probably tied with a couple others, but A Horrendous Rebirth on this EP. Super, super great song. There's synthesizers in there, which another thing and another way that Gorgasm continues to separate themselves from the pack, because they have this bass sound of straightforward brutal death metal, but they mix in so many cool things like classical melodies and just really morbid sounding synthesizers. Yeah, so this is 1998's Stab Wound Intercourse, coming in at number 3. At number 2 is their most recent record from 2014. This is Destined to Violate. This album is absolutely incredible and amazing, and it's just really cool to see a band that nearly 2 decades into their existence can write a record as extreme and as awesome as this. Gorgasm has really done the impossible, because so many bands just tank after the first couple records, after the first couple years. But Gorgasm, nearly 20 years into their existence, if they can write a record like this, I cannot wait to hear what they have next, because I've heard that they have a new record coming, I don't know about this year, but maybe next year. And if this is any indicator of what they got left in the tank, I think their new record is going to be absolutely insane. I wouldn't really call this a return to form, because they never really left their form, but in comparison to Orgy of Murder from 2011, this kind of definitely brings back that classic Gorgasm sound a little bit. The triple threat vocals are back, which I love. So you got those three distinct vocal styles just flying at you from all directions. Yeah, just so many memorable songs on here. This album, it's absolutely insane. My favorites on here, Cunt Killer, Carnivore, Visceral Discharge, and these, of course, Gorgasm lyrics are pretty just childish, gore lust, over the top lyrics, but it's pretty funny. It works well with their sound. But yeah, just a super killer record. Great performance by everyone on this lineup. Super fast, crazy blast beats. And this also features Corpseified, which is a song from their demo. And I'm really glad that they were able to bring that back. And yeah, this album's excellent. And like I said, it's got a little bit of like a comedic vibe. Some of the samples, and they got some puns in their song titles. It's just a little bit goofy, but super sick and twisted. Cool John Zig artwork. So yeah, coming in at number 2, this is 2014's Destined to Violate. And if you know your Gorgasm discography, you know what's coming up next. At number 1, this is their debut full-length from 2001, Bleeding Profusely, my favorite brutal death metal album, an absolute gem in the genre. I mean, not that it's underground or anything, but this thing is just wonderful. The reason it comes in at number 1 is definitely because of the classical melodies. They shine through the most on this album, and I feel like they're the most present, and they're even a little bit overly dramatic, which some people might not like, but personally, I'm just a huge sucker for those ear candy classical melodies, excuse me. And of course, combined with the melodies, this record is crazy fierce, really good production. I think they've recorded pretty much all their albums, I think, except for Destined to Violate at, what's the studio called? It's in Wisconsin. Is it Studio One? Something like that. But anyway, every record that came out of that studio just sounds really good. Russ Powell's bass work on here is super excellent, and that is very evident just in the first 10 seconds of the song when you get that funky, bluesy sounding bass break in track 1, Bleeding Profusely, the title track. But yeah, just every song has like a distinct and killer melody, which I really love. And this album is insanely disgusting and insanely nasty. I pretty much thought I couldn't be grossed out after listening to death metal for more than a couple months, you know. And I love the gore lyrics, but obviously they get redundant at some point. But Gorgasm does it super well. The first time I heard this, I just remember being so grossed out. They just take it so over the top, and it is just vile. Best songs on here: title track, Bleeding Profusely, Morbid Overgrowth, Fucking Sarah, Lesbian Stool Orgy. That song has my favorite Gorgasm melody ever. This also features a re-recording of Disembodied from the EP. But overall, yeah, this album is just pummeling and killer. Really good drumming by Dave Koros. He played session drums on here. It definitely isn't their fastest or their most technical, but to me, it's their most charming. And it's really those melodies that give it its charm. And I listen to this album. I've been pretty much listening to it on a daily basis for the last couple months, and this is one that is going to be one of my favorites forever. Definitely check this album out and the whole Gorgasm discography. They are a band that is super consistent, and all their albums are excellent. Damian Lesky has done a really good job keeping Gorgasm and that classic sound alive. And I really look forward to what this band is going to do next, because I know, like I said, they have plans to release an album fairly soon, I think. So anyway, thanks for watching.